All right, good morning, everyone. Settle in for an exciting 2 hours. I'm Philip Music with the GreenStep Cities program out of the MPCA. Thanks for being here today, and to our people. We have about 15 people. A few more signed up on the webinar. Welcome, webinar people. Webinar people, sorry you can't enjoy grapes and pastries and coffee, tea. Thank you, Kristen, for bringing that all on. So everyone, yeah, feel free to grab during these 2 hours something to eat and drink. We don't want to take it home. Oh, and also, so here we are at the League of Minnesota Cities offices here. Graciously, they host these webinars, and Danielle here was saying that as you come to these GreenStep, these monthly webinars, if you have a city mug, bring with your name, with your city name on it. Bring a mug if you can leave it. And LMC has been shifting over from single-use paper copy cups to mugs. So, and when you're finished with your mug today, just throw it in the sink here. So, anyways, thank you, Danielle. Thank you, LMC. I emailed to people on the webinar, and I have copies. I did print copies of what I've been seeing for a few years within the PCA, and this was an especially good, I thought, sort of review. And toward the end of our agenda, we'll have Wayne sort of perhaps mostly just answer questions about this whole range of issues around solid waste policy, management, research, funding, loans, grants, market development, which is one of Wayne's specialties. So, I just thought it was so good for me, who does not, I don't work in the field, but obviously working for GreenStep, we have a best practice solely devoted to sustainable consumption and waste prevention, recycling. So this was a really great summary. So I thought it would be excellent for skimming and asking some questions about it. So here's our agenda here. So we have a couple people from cities, and then Wayne, who's worked for a number of years at PCA, to help us through what, and I think the inspiration for this, Wayne and I were talking last, I don't know, spring probably, and we were just sort of lamenting the issues of contamination and recycling streams, and pricing issues, pricing costs of recycling. And it just felt like it would be good to pull people together, talk about the issue, related issues, and have a chance for you all to ask questions. Because, so I work in Wayne and I work in the Assistance Division of the MPCA. We used to be this smaller state agency, Office of Environmental Assistance. So there's always been this major solid waste management, pollution prevention focus of what's now the Assistance Division at the MPCA. So when the score, when the Minnesota legislation in 89 or 90 Select Committee on Recycling and Education, SCORE dollars, you all know them.
SCORE.
So when SCORE was passed, this tiny little office of, well, it was then the Office of Waste Management or Solid Waste Management Board. We hired a number of people, and so on the last page of this handout, we have a list of all these people at the MPCA working in this area. So this is one area of GreenStep where we can really, the MPCA can really provide very, very detailed, specific help to people in cities. And of course, you all, you have your solid waste officer at your county, so you're used to working with your county. But as we go into Greater Minnesota and some of the smaller counties, those solid waste officers, they have other hats, and they're pretty swamped. So, especially in Greater Minnesota, if you need help in this area, truly there is that sort of deep assistance available at the MPCA. So just sort of a quick sort of framing as we do on the GreenStep City website for every best practice, and as we like to do for the workshops. Just sort of the framing. So we're talking here. I mean, we're going to focus today on recycling and closing the loop. But the bigger picture, of course, is well, in the waste world, would be sustainable materials management. A term that probably I think 10 years ago, yes, did not exist. We maybe talked about sustainable consumption, obviously going way back to 70s, limits to growth, all that sort of modeling. I think, well, you know, is it possible on a finite world to sort of continue to use a sort of a linear model of materials management, where we dig things up, we sort of take things from the earth, we make things with them, and then we waste them, we throw them away. You know, is that possible on a finite world? And the early modeling said that it certainly is not. More recent modeling, which I recently sort of updated the best practice page, is that if you so recent modeling is that if we look at what is the rest of the world, sort of the poorest, really 6 billion people, you know, the poorest 6 billion people in the world, they would like to live a Minnesota lifestyle. They would like to live as the richest 500 million or million or billion people do. And the modeling is that if everyone in the world were living that sort of take, make, waste, largely, lifestyle, it would be the equivalent of having like 80 billion people on the earth. And that's just sort of not biophysically possible. So we know, and we know historically, and from your work, we know that the closing the loop, which we've talked about for decades in waste management and recycling, we know that that's the sort of the bigger concept here. But it's not trivial. We know the sort of the huge details of actually helping us all sort of understand that we can use materials and recycle them, and that we can help businesses make them into something else. Big issue. But that's sort of the bigger issue of really sustainable consumption of waste. So in GreenStep, our best practice 22, there are 8 specific actions, which I'll just mention. Obviously, that's where the heart of our challenge is for cities. But obviously, when we're talking about materials, material use, and discards, there are 3 other best practices, you know, major best practices that we need to think about. Buildings, so we have 5 best practices around buildings, and so we know certainly cities, not a lot of GreenStep cities, but we do have GreenStep cities that have a green building policy. St. Paul is the one that we've worked with closely. We're really happy to work with cities to craft policies. And to say, for example, the city of St. Paul, their green building policy is, if the city is conferring a financial or a regulatory benefit, well, St. Paul doesn't do that, but it is legal if you are, for example, chartering a planned unit development, a city can ask for something in return from the developer, and that can be things like St. Paul does, which is high levels of C&D waste, reuse, or recycling. So think about waste in terms of building. Certainly think about waste in terms of purchasing. Cities purchase, if your park board, if your park system is part of your city, you have a utility, you've got a liquor store, maybe you have a hospital, you know, a lot of purchasing goes on there. So there's an opportunity for looking at waste prevention, recycling. And then in your work with your businesses, so we have GreenStep, of course, has a business best practice, and so we point out that, you know, in your sort of assistance role, working with businesses in your cities, how you can put businesses in touch with assistance providers. And actually, we have a assistance provider from MinTap here, so Brent, thank you, our best practice advisor for the water and wastewater. Brent is here obviously since he knows about recycling issues too, so wants to learn more. So thank you. We have a few county people there. So I think we're going to do, okay, so those are the other best practices. Specifically for the solid waste best practice number 23, we have 8 actions. The first one is just the basics around city operations. So at the very least, we know that cities that do a good job in, so take City Hall, a good job of sort of modeling good sort of waste prevention and recycling. It's great for businesses and community members to see that. And obviously, there are ways in resource management contracts, for example, to save money on your total recycling waste bill. Our second action was actually added a few years. It didn't start out in 2010, but the second action around, this was really around sort of consumer packaging and a whole range from education to sort of fees, not bans, but sort of actions, reuse plastic bags, so there's an action around that. Ordinances would be simple stuff, especially in greater Minnesota, cities, sometimes counties, sometimes cities, sometimes both, licensed garbage haulers, but basic things like making sure that your contract, your ordinance has requirement that you get data back from your haulers. It's something you can ask for, and so we have models for that. The next two are obviously sort of basic, sort of going up the hierarchy here, so reuse and repair, encouraging that, helping that happen in businesses. In the city, organics, obviously a major issue that 10 years ago you were just seeing experiments. Commercial recycling is really, it sort of hits on business recycling efforts and multifamily housing. Collection, sort of ordinances, best practices around that, and organized collection. Obviously a touchy issue. Cities, GreenStep cities that have made that change from open hauling to collection have absolutely saved on wear and tear on their roads, and we have a MnDOT calculator on the resource page for that best practice action, where cities, and I'm thinking of Maplewood, that before they switched from their open hauling system, very difficult, very contentious, God knows when which is city to have to go through it, but cities that go through it, South Rapids, another example of a city with both very happy, community members very happy when it happens, and the cost savings, collective cost savings in terms of pickup, but really more the reduced wear and tear on roads, pretty significant, calculated. And then C&D waste, I know the MPCA is doing a sort of a listening, sort of data gathering process around C&D, which you know about. So those are the best practice actions there. So before Wayne talks, I thought maybe we just quickly go around the room and tell us your name and where you're from. Krista.
Hi guys, welcome new Green Corps members to your first GreenStep workshop. Audience. I'm Kristen Morose. I'm with the Environmental Quality Board, and
I'm Danielle Cabot. I'm with the League of Minnesota Cities.
Wayne Gjerde with the Pollution Control Agency Recycling Market Development.
Cassandra. I'm the recycling coordinator for the cities of West St. Paul, South St. Paul, Mendota Heights, and Sunfish Lake.
I'm Brent Buzenko. I'm from Minnesota Technical Assistance Program.
I'm Jill Crafton with the Isaac Walton League, and we were strong supporters in our city for organized collection, saving $400,000 worth of damage to the street.
Oh, so your calculation of 400,000, that's per year.
That's what they were. That's what they do.
That was the calculation. $400,000 saved. Cool. All right.
Good morning. Peter Lindstrom, and I'm with the Clean Energy Resource Team, and I'm at council.
Taylor Fisher with the city of St. Louis Park.
Julie Moore with the city of Shorewood.
Joe Harkin with the city of Ardville, I'm the recycling coordinator and associate planner.
Megan Schley, city of Houston.
And I'm a Green Corps member at Dakota Valley Recycling.
I'm Jackson Becker with Dakota Valley Recycling. So we are the second department for Burnsville, Apple Valley.
Mary Schultz, city of Lilydale.
Alice Sutherland with the city of
Simone Allison, Minneapolis. Lindsay Anderson, Minnesota Green Corps member serving Hastings.
Mark Casey, city of Van. Dan Saunders from Ramsey County Environmental Health.
Jeanette Connell from Environmental Health.
Well, great range, and hello to everyone on the webinar. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. As I said, we have 3 speakers. We'll grab some questions from the webinar, so you can use the little chat box to
Did anyone say online where they're from?
add in.
We didn't ask.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
very rude.
Sorry.
You know, we did have, I should have printed a list. Hey, I will, yeah, that's what
I
we,
should have read the list.
yeah, we find, it seems like every time we do one of these workshop webinars, we, like, little innovations, like, so we sent this out, it's like, oh, yeah, we have these references of everyone who signed up, we found those, so.
We have Beth from Northfield, Leslie from Marine on St. Croix, Colleen from Coon Rapids, Kaya, a Green Corps member with the City of Duluth, Rachel from Richfield, a representative from Shoreview, Danica, the Green Corps member with HRDC in Bemidji.
Okay, yeah.
Laura Horner, City of Bloomington, there we go. Amber with Hair Market, a zero waste shop in Minneapolis.
Has anyone been?
Nettie from SRDC, Southwest CERT, and SW Regional Solid Waste Commission. Chris, Southeast CERT Coordinator. Amanda from Marshall. That might be everyone who's going to roll call off. That was exciting.
Oh, great.
Oh, we have Rosemary from SRDC as well.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, obviously, one thing, GreenStep does, and what I would like to gather people together visually and in person, and on the website, is that as you're doing things in your city, thinking about doing things in your city, we know you want to look around and see what other cities are doing. So always, go to the GreenStep City's website, look at an action that you're thinking about, and then go down. We've rejigged the page, but you see the action, you see the resources for taking action, sort of the star guidance, what would be a good, better, best way to complete the action, and then you have all the list of cities that have completed the action. So I always start with cities that have 3 stars for an action. Open up the page and then read what a city has done, and if it looks good, call the person who can see, or obviously talk to others in the room or online. So further ado, I'm going to introduce Wayne, who will take us through starting talking about the big picture, the work that he's done for years. So Wayne has been with us. Wayne was a banker, Wayne's a farmer.
Well, I don't know how much longer about that. That out there.
But, so anyway, think of your questions and take away.
Sure. Wayne Gjerde, and I'm the Recycling Market Development Coordinator. I work with 2 other people, Susan Heffron and Jennifer Wynn Moore, who are in Duluth today at another meeting, and so I'll be joining them tomorrow at Verso and NRI. So I will talk about those projects a little bit later. But I'm sure if you're with a city, if you had a revenue sharing contract, you know that you're getting 0 or less than 0, or you're paying according to those contracts. So I'll at least give you my own advice on that, other than say the cure for low prices are low prices. So recyclables are a commodity, and they do go up and down. We're in an extended period of down. However, in the 90s, we had negative pricing on high-density polyethylene and PET. I think, as I remember, milk jugs are, which was mostly, that's what it was in the 90s, were a negative 5 cents a pound, and PET was negative 10 cents a pound. So we're not at that on those 2 commodities. Actually, plastic is doing relatively well compared to the other commodities. But what happened? We used to export 40% of our recyclables to China, and now it's probably 5%, or they are being converted into other finished materials. So, but that almost zero in terms of, hey, let's bale up a bale of paper or plastic or whatever and ship it out. It isn't happening. And the reason why is we sent them a lot of junk over the years. And some of these bales towards the end, which is precipitated the green fences, some of these bales were coming in and they were 50% trash. And so they decided that their system of how they separated that, which essentially was very manual, that they didn't want to be the dumping ground for all our trash, and they needed to upgrade to get more technology in there. So that was the start in 2013. Then it went on to Blue Skies. I don't know what the current term is now, but I think it's still Blue Skies. And of course we have trade issues too, which recyclables were part of that whole trade. If you're going to hurt the U.S. and that's the major market, what are you going to do? Restrict that. So I think that has something to do with it too. Of course, as you let's see here, they're on. Well, I can point here too. That's fine. So as restrictions happen, well, okay, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. For the west of that, India. So, well, okay, let's ship the stuff there. Well, that's how we went from Green Friends to our current. So we instead of shipping junk to China, we ship junk to all those other countries, and then they decided, well, we don't need that stuff either. And so they, one by one, have restricted, import of recyclables, or put drastic restrictions on there. So, but a lot of plastic recycling is going on in Vietnam yet. The bales are clean and that sort of thing. So, and if you guys have any questions while I'm talking about this, please just raise your hand. So we'll go from there. Is it the right or the left?
Clicker, should be the right one.
Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. So what's happening? Well, we have probably 50% of our recycling stream, if you include glass and paper, that are at zero or less than zero. Glass has been there for a while, but mixed paper has been there for probably a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. Transportation costs went up. When the electronic logs went in, mandatory electronic logs went in for trucking, there was no more driving 20 hours from California to here and putting down, well, I only drove 8 hours a day. The day that happened, transportation prices went up 30%, and that was a year ago, March. So there's limited markets, plastic film, which we don't collect a lot of it, but I've been working on some plastic projects for a while. From 2003 to 2013, 15, did we invest in this country in our local ability, and I'm talking both Minnesota and nationally? No, we didn't. We didn't do that. Contamination and recycling. And for those of you who have been in a material recycling facility, the things that you see come in there are fairly amazing. And diapers, bowling balls, hoses, occasionally car engines. I don't know how they get them in their cart, but they somehow get them in there, or maybe they come in through the commercial side. Batteries, big issue, particularly the rechargeable ones. There's fires every week at these facilities. In fact, Demcon's facility a year ago, this last September, burnt to the ground. They had a sprinkling system in there, but they had a fire and it burned. So So, gaps in public education. You know, we went to the state fair, people were, you think, geez, I've been at this 24 years, Phil's been at this a little bit longer. I'm hearing the same questions that I heard 24 years ago, which is sometimes not good, and at least people are interested. I think we just got our how many people went through the building? It was like 268,000 people, so we were up slightly. So of the 2 million people, we had roughly 10%, or a little bit more than 10% went through our building. So, where are we at right now? So the national contamination rate in a bale, well, is 17%. At least that's the latest news we had come in. Minnesota, well, we should be proud. We have probably the best and most up-to-date in terms of technology material recycling facilities in the country, at least from talking to other people. So our bale rates, contamination rates, and that's, you know, if you have a paper bale that, you know, that has something other than paper in, is about 5%. So it's depending on which, but it pretty much hangs right around 5%. That may be a little bit more companies, or a little bit more depending on what material it is. We had 260 companies. However, I'm just updating our. If you've read the job numbers, I'm finding, particularly in the paper area, have lost a fair amount of jobs in that area. As companies have downsized or gone out of business. For example, we lost Built Right out of International Falls, although there's talk of restarting that company. We lost a insulation, Paul's Insulation out of Burgess, which is, you know, rural jobs. When I talked to him, he blamed it on the government. I'm not sure what we did to force him out of business. Anyway, he wasn't a happy person. But here's the good news. We're still recycling material. For all those articles in the New York Times and other West Coast, East Coast paper, here in Flyover Land, which we're very proud of, we are not landfilling anything. We have not had a request to landfill anything. So, are the material recycling facilities making money? Not a lot, but they are moving the material, so that's a good thing. But there's not a lot of profit, at least at the area where you're providing material to somebody else. If you're vertically integrated, West Rock, you know, where you're getting bales material in, or people are dumping, or Avon Plastics or Bedford, where, you know, you're taking that bale of material, washing it, pelletizing, making something, yeah, they're doing okay. We were just out a couple weeks ago to Avon Plastics. So they are, they recently went into Lowe's, and their sales have gone up dramatically, probably 10 to 15% in the last, since they've been in there. So they're in a good place, and as we do, there are some clouds of recession coming on, but, you know, I don't think that we're going to see 2008 where it's a complete meltdown. So we may have some slowdown. So. There we go. All right, so what are we working on right now? Oh, there we go. All right. So we've been working on ag plastic, and I've been working on ag plastic for a long time, 20 years. We've had some spectacular failures. We almost had a wash line, and then, of course, the company didn't deliver the equipment, and that was the last. And now we've been talking to Revolution Plastics came in and started a free program, and then when the trucking rates went up, that program was no longer free because it just took their model. They were shipping plastic down to Arkansas, which they still are. However, the counties are picking up the tab in terms of collecting that plastic. So they're collecting in about 20 counties. So they are putting or serving counties that have the most volume in terms of volume per week or per month in terms of ability to get truckload quantities. We've been working on to get our own facilities here. The issue we have right now is, okay, once we wash it and pelletize it, who's going to buy it? We've been talking to some rather large Fortune 500 companies to get them to commit to do that, and we haven't been successful as yet, but we'll continue. Sometimes these projects take a lot of zigs and zags on the way there. It's not market development is not a straight line. In fact, sometimes it goes in circles.
Explain
yes.
for our urban crowd.
Sure.
Would you explain what ag plastic is?
All right, sure. Well, ag plastic can be urban too. If you look at the film on your hoop houses, and I'll include other plastic film, boats. When you see all those white boat covers or blue, that's the urban stuff. Film is the plastic that's coming into your stores. So when you see that overstuffed thing as you shop at your store, ask them to put more bins in. So, because that discourages people from putting, if it's full, I think, maybe I won't bring it in next time. But agricultural plastic is a couple different things. It's those long silage bags that you see. They look like big marshmallows, and they could be anywhere from 100 feet to 500 feet long. You have grain bags, which essentially are the same, but it's got, with these rather large farms. There are farms out there. There's one in particular that's in Northwest of 35,000 acres. This person is farming, or entity, I should say, person. And so if it's dry enough, or they have portable dryers, they will dry in the field and leave it out there, and rather than bring it in, because to build a steel bin is $2 a bushel. To use a bag is about 5 cents a bushel. So you do this for 20 years. So bale wrap. If you've seen these big round bales, they're about my height. They will wrap those bales, and the reason why is climate change. I mean, look at the weather this week. Well, look at the weather this summer. It used to be, when I was growing up on the farm, we'd cut the hay, we'd let it dry for a couple days, and then we'd bale it or put it up. Well, you don't have that luxury anymore, because you don't have that 2 or 3 day window or 4 day window. So now, because of that, they have to wrap it, and they ferment the ferments in the wrap. So that's what that is. So all those silos that you see out there, everybody know what a silo is? They generally 100 feet or more. 95% of those are not used. And I was just reading an article in the paper today. We've lost, Wisconsin has lost 1,000 dairy farms in the last 5 years. I know in Minnesota we've lost about 150 this year so far. The trend is bigger. So in the county that I farm in, we have essentially 3 dairy farms, which are owned by the Davis family. And there is 16,000 cows between those 3 farms. And they have automated milkers. They run 24 hours a day. So that's the trend in agriculture, not only for cows, but for pretty much everything. So film wash line, pelletizing. So we've talked to, other than plastic film, talked to some other people. One project in particular is moving forward. Mixed paper. So we never used to optically sort. Does everybody know what an optical sorter is? No. No. All right. So if you get a chance to tour a material recycling facility, you will see these machines that will essentially, if it's plastic, it's by density. They will identify what kind of plastic is, and they will pop it either up or down by air jet. So you'll see the stuff flying up or down. Well, they can now do that with paper. So why is mixed paper worth nothing at the moment? -$5 a ton is because it's newspaper, it's mixed office, it's a little bit of cardboard, a little bit of box board. Well, high-grade office is worth $100 a ton. Even number 8 news is worth $40 a ton if it doesn't have any other stuff in there. All mixed together, it's worth negative. So we are in the middle of financing. They're getting their financing package. This will be in it's Green Forest paper, Green Forest recycling, and it'll be in the old Brown Printing building in Waseca, which is a huge, huge building. Brown Printing went out of business 2 years ago, maybe 3, but they were the reason that Waseca County had a really high recycling rate was because of Brown Printing. The recycling rate went down. But anyway, that will be the beginning, and I'm pretty excited about that one because paper is 25% or maybe a little bit more, give or take, of your stream coming in. So, and by weight. So, compostable serviceware projects. That's where Susan and Jennifer are today. And we're going to meet tomorrow. And so the great thing about, we have 2 things going on. The good things about these projects, they will be, right now, if you have a paper plate, a boat, or whatever, it has coating in there containing PFAS or PFOS or PFOA products. Well, as of 2020, I think I have the date right on there. In order to be certified composter, we have to go through BPI. I'm trying to think what BPI is, the actual, what it means. But anyway, if you have BPI certification, that means you've been certified, your product is compostable. Both of these projects will have no PFAS or PFOA in it. So one, we're working with NatureWorks, which is PLA, and the other one is these people are out of Israel. So at the moment, I think it goes back and forth. Again, I think the NatureWorks project is kind of moving ahead faster at this point. But W-Cycle is the other one. They kind of, like most projects, are in the going back and forth. But that's, we're going tomorrow, NRRI, which is the Natural Resources Research Institute, which is a branch of University of Minnesota Duluth, and they have all kinds of ability to do R&D, test things, etc. So they've been working with us. We've been using them quite extensively on that. Glass, foam glass. I was talking to Strategic Materials yesterday, and our amount of glass coming into our system has gone down almost 10% in the last 2 years. So I don't think we're producing less glass. It's just that it isn't coming in. So they want to be at least 100,000 tons of glass, and they're a little bit concerned about making that this year. So that glass goes to Kansas City to make insulation, and it goes to Anchor Glass, and it goes to another glass company. And there's some other miscellaneous stuff. So what's foam glass? Foam glass. Well, has everybody seen lava rock or landscape? It looks a little bit porous, but in this case, It looks that way, but it's not porous. I mean, you can do open cell, which will allow you to absorb water. But foam glass is an aggregate. Let's see, I'm trying to think. 35. When they did the bridge or the new on 36, the new ramp, they put up these huge blocks of polystyrene in there. Well, that's the current method that for if you're going to swampy or material or ground that you need some lightweight aggregate. So lightweight aggregate in the past was wood chips. Well, you got tannins that come out of there, and they eventually disintegrate, so then you have to build the road again. You have material shipped up from Missouri, which is essentially a lightweight clay that's had, I'm not sure how the process they do that, how they take the weight out of it. And then you have polystyrene, which I think is the #1 thing we're using right now. So bridge abutments, next to a bridge, if you want to keep the dirt from sliding down, you use polystyrene and then you throw some dirt over it or some lightweight fill. That keeps the bridge in place. When you have, if you get too much heavy material against there, it affects the bridge and the bridge will shift a little bit. So foam glass that's the same principle. Now, would you use it on every road out there? No, it'd be too expensive. But where you really need specialty situations like those bridge abutments going through where there's more water, the water table is high, this is a great material because it's glass, it's inert. Polystyrene, probably not inert. Wood chips, not inert. Dirt, probably, although I don't know what the process, that clay that they ship up. But, it will stay in place for a long time. So, we have 2 entities that are vying, which is good. I think one is ahead of the other. They've expressed interest in building a plant in Minnesota, so we'll see what happens. Here's the good thing about that is they can use windshield glass. So I've worked on windshield glass before, and there really hasn't been a home. We landfill all our windshields. We're probably, I think, about 1 million windshields a year at about 25 to 30 pounds of, so a fair amount of material. Commercial glass that you would see in your building, if you can figure out a way to efficiently process that, would just get the glass. I could use that too. We haven't had a home for that either. So, all right. Well, what else are we doing? A good picture of our. How many people went to the state fair this year? How many went through the Eco Experience building? So it was Paul's last year. So we'll see what we have next year. But we're thinking about we have maybe getting Babe the Blue Ox with some blue jean insulation and say who needs Paul. So I don't know. But you can kind of see recycle rate. We were talking to people about, well, what do you put in your bin? So we have a grant loan program. We were fortunate enough that the legislature gave us $400,000 a year to work on market development. We've had $50,000 a year for 3 years, and before that we had 0 for about 12 years, other than the loan. We're working with the Minnesota Sustainable Sports and Events Coalition. We formed a quarterly group. We formed this group, kind of an informal group, but we meet quarterly. And we have every major sports team in town, and then Valley Fair and some other. We get new members all the time. So, and talk about how to do recycling at your events or at your stadiums. It's a continual education process there. So we have general education at the fair, which you see Jennifer, who is our new person. We talked a lot about recycling rate and what put in and what not to put in. So, interesting enough, you can kind of see right there in the garden hose. You'd ask people, put that in your recycling bin. And I would say over 50% of the people said, yes, you would. They didn't know that when that hose came into the recycling facility, it just wrapped up into the rollers. So the average MRF spends out of their 8-hour shift about 1 to 2 hours a shift. They shut down and cut all the plastic bags and other stuff out of there. So we talked about plastic bags. Put that in there. Other glass, you know, glass is kind of like plastic. Glass is glass, right? Must be recycled. Well, not all of it. So the Recycling Education Committee, which I think some of you have participated, right, is putting out some guidance to the cities, and the idea behind that is, hey, if I'm in Hastings or if I'm in Shorewood or we get all the same information. So I think that's been pretty successful, and we've been working with the Recycling Partnership, and they'll roll out the sign maker and some other things, tools out there to work on that. Our Recycling Market Development Working Group, which we have talked about, paper, we have a paper, glass, and organics. And so we're talking, about opportunities in those areas. And mixed paper and glass, as you heard me talk about, well, they're not worth anything. So they are the most, and they're good majority of recycling stream, then we need to figure out how to raise the value. And the best way to do that is have increased end market capacity. So we're moving along, and that's led, well, we convene the group, but we have non-PCA people like Dan that are champions in each group. We got as much outside people as we could in order to lessen the workload and increase the ideas and make sure something happens. I do it on time.
5-10 minutes.
All right. All right. So that's a whole. You can read that, but essentially, what we're trying to do is what we've been talking about for the last 20 years. Bill talked about sustainable, circular economy, meet our goals. We have, recycling has all kinds of benefits to it. Obviously, reuse is important, which we have a reuse group. If you don't have to produce in the first place, that's even better. But we're not there yet. So see the no, Kelly, Dan's the only one here, right? So as we move forward, so glass, we've been talking in particular about, well, what's out there? What are we doing? I was talking to Anchor Glass. We have 180 craft brewers in the state. So I talked to Anchor and said, well, are you selling them any growlers? Well, no, we're not. So both of their furnaces are using flint. I don't know why flint to me means black, but that's the industry term for clear glass. So they have a whole pile of amber glass. And so we're having some discussions to see if we can start that furnace up for at least a couple months a year. There is some cost to switch it over. So mixed paper, we have a little different. We're talking about, we're being a little more strategic in terms of what's out there and what can we do to move that forward. And then organics, I'm not on that, but there's separate money for organics, but there may be some infrastructure or some engineering or something we need to do. So we're not sure yet. I talked about the $800,000. That $1.5 million is That's the organics is for food waste reduction and food to people. So that is a substantial amount of money. I think in the past we had asked for millions more, but we finally got some money. And so we're in the process of figuring out how to spend that. So there'll be an RFP out there'll be an RFP out for this and this. For the first 400,000, we're hoping to have one out by January for the market stuff. So, and then the food waste, I'm not quite sure, but probably sometime in 2020, hopefully by the end of, before June 30th. So, okay, so I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. If you have any questions, certainly you know me, but we have Jennifer and we have Susan, so don't feel you have to just talk to me. We have Jennifer is spending about 60% of her time on market development. And she's also on the Recycling and Education Committee, so she knows about that too. And Jennifer's been around in terms of she was with the City of Bloomington and she was St. Louis Park too, I think. I thought at one time, maybe as an intern. Yeah, maybe a long time ago, I thought she said. But anyway, or send us an email. Yeah, that works too. Hey, I need to talk to you. I mean, I sometimes, and I have my cell, I don't know why I didn't put my cell phone number, and that's usually the best way to get a hold of me, or send me an email in terms of handing time. So we take calls all the time. So if we don't know the answer, we'll try to direct you to the right person. Anyway, that's what I have. This is, Phil mentioned, the salt waste update. There's a lot of information packed in there. We try to update this thing on at least annual basis, but quarterly or as things are happening. And these days, things are happening every month. We have, I was at the Association of Plastic Recyclers, and they talked a lot about black plastic. They said, well, if we reprogram the optical sorters, we think we can sort that out. All right. Well, they're still working on it. Chemical recycling, which I wish they wouldn't call it that, because I'm not sure if it goes back into new resin, which it can, then yes, it's recycling, but most of the time it's being made into fuel. So to me, that's incineration. But there's some new stuff out there. I think it's somewhat shadow and mirrors at the moment. There's some things going on. We'll see what happens on that. There are some positive things going on. But if you want to learn more about that, the Association of Plastic Recyclers has probably the most information, or the American Chemistry Council. So, yes.
Is this something that you can subscribe to?
How
do you find it? Monthly or quarterly?
Well, generally we've been sending it out to the counties, but I thought, did we send it out to ARM too? We may have not, but if we haven't, I'll make a point of sending this out through the Association of Recycling Managers, and so the cities will get that. So we sometimes, we work and we don't communicate, or we communicate, we don't work. Sometimes, just there's so much stuff to do. So, but I'll make a point. And then I think the Recycling Education Committee, that's, if you're not in that group, you can talk to Jennifer. I think there's people can join that group too, which maybe won't be as extensive, but we'll get that out. Or if you go to any of the conferences, the Recycling Association Minnesota Fall Conference, we'll talk about this, I'm sure. And we just had the Solid Waste Administrators meeting, which we talked about that too. So
I have some questions from the webinar. Where are the recyclers moving materials to if the Chinese Asian markets are basically gone? Chinese/Asian markets.
Okay, well, plastic, we have a rather robust infrastructure because we've spent the money at the state level and local. So we have Avon Plastics and Bedford Technology and RPI, the polyethylene. And then we have, from a commercial standpoint, we have Choice Plastics, which is moving material, your carts, your bulky stuff. So paper, West Rock, Liberty Paper, in terms of cardboard. Newspaper, we have Pactiv, which makes 23 million egg cartons a month, which is, we ship egg cartons out of the state of Minnesota, mostly to California, which is kind of amazing. We have LEI, and then of course we have International Paper, which takes them. So because Minnesota has been doing market development since 1988, we can move the stuff. However, the states that didn't spend any money or spent very little money are flooding our markets because they didn't, they don't have any place for it to go. So
we weren't necessarily sending stuff to Asia to begin with because we have these domestic markets?
We did export out of the state. I mean, we can't control to say that Waste Management or Republic or others weren't exporting materials. They were. However, probably not to the extent of other states. For example, West Rock is 1,000 tons a day. We lost West Rock, we'd be in a whole world hurt. Liberty Paper is 600 tons a day. So they run 360 days a year. They take a week to do maintenance. And there's neighboring states too. North and South Dakota, no. But if you go further east, there's some material. So a lot of our material is regionally, but we ship material to KW in Alabama. They have 500 million pounds of capacity for polyethylene and polypropylene. So they're the biggest plastic processor in the U.S. at the current. So some of our plastic goes to the southeast. There's a concentration from North Carolina down to Alabama of plastic processors. PET bottles go to Shaw. They make carpet out of them. So we have not had enough volume to get a processor to do that.
So since some of these products are worth zero or less than zero, are cities, counties just handing it over to them, or how does that work?
Well, there's some surcharges so we can talk a little bit about contracts. Here's what I will say about contracts. Right now, they're probably saying, hey, let's renegotiate our contract. And I would be careful in how you renegotiate that contract because these prices will come back. So if you have I would not throw away your ability to collect money at some point in the future when the prices turn around. And they will turn around. I can't tell you when, but probably in the next 2 or 3 years. But there are surcharges. Cities are paying processing fee if it already wasn't in their contract. The problem you had with some programs is they funded their whole program out of the fees that they were getting back, and they didn't have any base funding. And then, of course, when the processors said, hey, I need $50,000 this month, they didn't have it because it wasn't built into their budget. So that's the stuff that's going on right now. So I encourage everybody to have their initial base funding and use, if they are getting money, to use that to create a reserve or do other things with it so they don't have to rely on that. So anyway.
So just try to help me understand how this works. So I put recycling in my bin. What happens? What do they do with it? Do they?
So we have seven material recycling. Or no, 7, 5, 6. in the metro area. So it goes into your facility. If it's collected for recycling, of course, the law is it has to go to a material recycling facility. You can't landfill it unless you had our permission. We are unlikely to do that. We will work diligently, and as we have in the past, to make sure that stuff finds a home. So it comes in, the truck drops it out of one of the facilities. So there's tennis, there's Dick's Sanitation, Demcon, Waste Management. Republic has 2 facilities, Randy's, and Eureka, yes. So Eureka is in kind of a unique position because they service all Minneapolis and St. Paul. So all the recyclable material goes into their facility. So. But that's where it goes, at least in the metro area. Out greater Minnesota, there's various facilities. That's where we had some issues in terms of some of that funding, where the markets are, or maybe lack of markets in terms of their awareness of that. And so some are, Polk County has a rather sophisticated system. Renville stopped taking glass. They thought it was too expensive to ship it into to strategic materials in St. Paul, which is our only glass processor.
So
Does that answer your question?
8 cartons that are not plastic, we can't put those in recyclables, right?
8 cartons, no.
So what,
Throw them in the trash.
I guess whatever happened to?
Organics,
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. If you
Sure.
had organics, yeah, you could compost. If you have commercial compost, yeah, those could
We
go
have
in.
in Bloomington, there's a site now where we can do.
Yeah, all right. So you can bring as long as they're not polystyrene. And there's still one out there, Eggs Best. I saw one in the store. There's still 1 or 2 that have polystyrene. Obviously, those have to go in the trash. They're not compostable. So.
And the plastic, so if I drop my plastic bags off at the grocery store,
Yep.
where does that go?
Mostly the trucks, but there's a couple other smaller processes.
So does it get made into anything?
Yeah, it gets made into lumber, yes. So be assured, if it's dropped off someplace, it is not landfill. So,
But we're still not thinking in terms of life cycle products.
we are doing some work at the PCA in terms of that. Now, here's the issue. You had baby food went from glass to plastic. Well, from a life cycle analysis, that's good because it uses less energy. However, they went from a recyclable package to a non-recyclable package. So we would like to close that loop completely and say, so this may be where chemical recycling comes in. I don't know, but they save a lot of money because glass is much heavier. And I don't know, well, at least when I had kids, we used those glass baby food jars for everything. So I'm sure people still have a few of those.
So if I have more questions, I can just call Jennifer. She'll be able to.
Yes, well, call any of us, so, or send us an email. Yeah, that's actually send us an email because then those allow us to kind of think about this one.
But I would say as a part of it, I mean, if it's specific questions about what can I recycle in my bin or,
Yeah,
you know, where do you go, start with your city,
yeah,
start with your county.
right.
And then if it's more of that market type question.
Yeah, if it's, you know, where's my paper going? That's us. What do I put in the bin? Like you say, so the rec, recycling education committee is putting out some stuff. And so,
any other question? Okay.
We have a couple more.
A couple more.
Webinar. Maybe we can
okay.
whip through these, maybe not. If they're longer, then you can make that call. Are you available to talk with EDAs about recycling or market development?
Economic Development Associations, yes, we are.
Okay, so that's a yes. Moving right on to the next one. Email Wayne. Any updates on organic sites in the North Metro?
That is a Kayla Walsh and Tim Farnan.
Okay, all right. Let's see, and
And they're on
then,
that.
There's the back, yeah, right.
That back list, their email is on there, so email them.
do you have best practices available for structuring recycling rates? Do you recommend revenue shares or a fixed rate?
That's a more complicated question. I gave some general information. I think, I'm sure every city out there if they have a contract with the hauler, has been asked to renegotiate the contract. So, we have the state contract, so which does provide some guidelines. I can send that out.
Okay.
That has some things in there that may be useful in your contract, so.
And then someone has a note that they would like to share that the REC Recycling Outreach Guide is now published and available for all.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
For those of us that don't know what that is, can you articulate?
Okay, so the Recycling Education Guide is a partnership grant with the Recycling Partnership, and it went through, talks about do's and don'ts. What do you put in your bin? What don't you put in your bin? How do you educate? How do you put education out to your citizens? They're a sign maker. So if you have recycling in your parks, which I've seen signs that are, well, no signs, which case you get junk in your bin. I have to say my own city could do a better job in that. To really good signs. So there is, despite education is part of the solution, but not the whole solution. But it's a good place. People need to be constantly educated. Why do you think Coke has, how many Coke commercials or McDonald's commercials do you see a day? Thousands, hundreds, whatever. So the same goes for recycling. People need to be constantly reminded and educated about recycling.
Okay, that guide is on the RAM site.
We should get that added to the, best practice.
Yeah, it may not be there. Yeah, you said.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let's give a hand for Wayne here. So we're going to hear from a couple of cities. First, Julie Moore, City of Shorewood. Julie, I think, has to run right after she talks about sort of how this is playing out in your city. So we're glad you could make it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So for those of you I haven't met before, and for those on the phone, I'm Julie Moore, and I am the Communications and Recycling Coordinator at City of Shorewood. We are a city of, I don't know where the little clicker went.
Oh, here we go. Let's see.
I only have the one slide, so we'll be painless. We're a city of a population of about
do we have it here?
7,600 people. That's okay. It does, I don't know.
I probably didn't put it in. Oh.
It's okay. It's not an important slide.
One slide, okay.
So we're a population of about 7,600, about 2,700 households. So we're one of the smaller cities. We are very active when it comes to sustainability and recycling, and have been for a number of years. We currently are with Republic Services in an organized hauling program. We do not have organized trash hauling. Therefore, only one of our haulers offers organics collection curbside to residents. We're looking at options for that over the next year as the rules change for us. But fortunately for us, we did already have the organized recycling. So we are single sort as our most and every other week collection. The challenges that I've been asked to talk about with small cities are pretty common with small cities. We are an outer ring suburb. Many of you probably on the phone are also outstate, having that added challenge. We have lots of lakes in our community and wetlands, so we have lots of cul-de-sacs, we have lots of dead ends. The trucks don't have straight through drives. Therefore, collection can be kind of a challenge, especially with those long driveways. We have really done a really strong education job on how to get people to move their recycling into the right spot and get the most efficient collection we can. The result has been our price has been pretty competitive from Republic Services, although because we're a smaller city and we don't have the number of pickups, we are always going to be a little higher priced than the larger cities. So as a small city, that's always a challenge, and so you do what you can to keep the prices down. The one big thing that we do in Shorewood, and we're lucky because I also handle the communications efforts, is education. We are a very strong advocate of recycling education. I was one of the big proponents who helped start the REC program, that Recycling Education Committee. I'm a big believer in sustainable materials management, which is making sure that the things we are asking to be recycled actually can be recycled. I really try not to add anything to our contract that will be taken away. A good example is shredded paper. Even though our recycler had said they would collect shredded paper in the cart a number of years ago, I kept it out, and fortunately I didn't have to re-educate people quite so much on pulling it out now that they don't want it anymore. Plastic bags are another great example of that. And I think that's one of the struggles that we all go through. But I think particularly in small cities where we are having to do a little more one-on-one education and we don't have the budget. As far as the market challenges that we have seen, I would say the biggest thing has been, because we have a more restrictive budget, we have never been one that wanted to do the revenue sharing because we wanted a stable price. We don't have the big funds to kind of back us up on those down years. So we kind of liked that stability of being able to, even though it was a little more expensive, paying that fixed price and knowing what we were going to pay from year to year. The market challenges have changed that a little bit. We're currently in contract negotiations for our new contract. We were at least lucky enough to be already moving in that direction and at the end of our period, so we weren't doing a mid-cycle renegotiation. But we have already talked to our public services, and there will be a 4% increase every year, and there will also be a recycling processing fee that is added to our cost. That's never been there before. What that recycling processing fee is it takes what they make on the recycling and it subtracts the cost of their recycling and the residual from it. So it generally in this market is going to always be a fee to us. It could, as Wayne said, in years when we start making money, it could be a perk, but I don't think we'll be budgeting that way for quite a while. I think the hardest thing that I have seen is the fact that all of us have, by weight, most of our items being corrugated, mixed paper, and glass, which are the three biggest markets that have taken the biggest hit. I think Wayne is concentrating on those particular markets probably for a lot of that reason. They're the ones taking the big hit, and they're a big part of our weight. I think that the biggest boon to smaller cities and our education program is that we can more easily reduce our residuals. Shorewood is really lucky. We have a 95% set out rate for recycling, so we're really high. And we, in our June waste sort, only had a 5% residual rate. The residual rate, for those of you who don't know, is basically trash. Trash that's put in, non-recyclables, or things that shouldn't be recycled in the cart. And that is extremely low, and that has helped our pricing. So my advice to those of you who are in smaller cities and need to keep those prices down is to work with your communication staff if you have one, or whoever puts out your newsletter, or if it's your local newspaper, and really get that education up there. Try to get people making sure that they're putting the right things in the cart. And I think Kayla will probably touch on that too. That's what's going to keep our prices down. That's what's going to keep our markets up. I think the one thing that the whole market, I guess I'll call it crisis, I don't know how much of a crisis, if we want to call it that. The one thing it's done for us is I think it's kind of straightened up our act. I think we were putting a lot of things in there that we weren't supposed to. The whole wish cycling phrase was kind of created in Minnesota, I think. We had a Star Tribune writer that developed it, and now it's everywhere. And I think we all want things to go to a better place. I don't think we want them to go to landfills and burners, and I think the dream got a little too big. We got a little too anxious about what we could put in our cart, and I think education is going to be what saves us from that. And I think that maybe this whole China thing hasn't been such a bad thing. It's really helped in Shorewood. The one thing that surprised me, being that I pride our whole program in education, is I did a non-scientific survey on nextdoor.com of Shorewood residents, asking if they felt that they were getting the proper recycling education so that they could recycle well. And we have a newsletter, and we have several social media sites, and a newsletter blast system just for recycling. And I still had a 42% rate of people who felt they did not get enough education. And even though 57% said they did, which is great, more than half, that really bothered me, that as much as we put out there, 42% of the people still felt they weren't getting enough. It was a great way to educate the public that we had this newsletter and education email that goes out every other week. And right away, I got a number of people signing up for that when I was able to introduce that. So I would highly recommend you really do reach out, even if it's non-scientific, even if it's a Survey Monkey or one of the nextdoor.com or one of the Facebook surveys. I would highly recommend you reach out into your community and see what you can do as far as finding out what the people need. I think when we get in all of our meetings and we meet with our recycling company, we kind of expect the education to come from the company, and I don't think it does. And even if it's in our contract, I think a big burden is on the city. So I would say the biggest thing that you can do is get out there and educate your public on the market and what is recyclable and what is not, and try not to add those things that are iffy or that are recyclable right now but might not be tomorrow. So I know that's brief, maybe getting us back on schedule a little bit, but if anybody has any quick questions about small market.
So you've got a website, we could go look at your information.
You could go to the City of Shorewood website. We also, through that, you could also sign up for our recycling e-news. It's general enough that I think it would probably benefit anybody from any city, but I think it's been real popular in the FL education.
Do you ever host like in-person meetings with the community to discuss like recycling trends or practices or anything like that?
We attempted to a few times. They weren't extremely successfully attended. We had the ones that are the best are the ones with our senior group, because they're, I think, more anxious to learn, and they probably have the time a little bit more. We have a newly started recycling committee that's a citizen committee, and that's what they're talking about, doing a little more of the neighborhood groups. Shorewood isn't one of those communities like a Minneapolis or a St. Louis Park that has set neighborhoods. We have a few, but to try to kind of break our city down and do some ambassador type work, we're working on attempting that. Did you have a question? Okay.
Do you do any kind of curbside pickup? Bloomington has it's not been cost effective, but.
The cleanup event?
Yeah, and the cleanup audit, and so I wondered if.
We do a drop-off. We years ago did a curbside, like City of Bloomington does. It was not very cost effective for one, and it was a great reuse market because lots of stuff got collected. That's the one thing people miss the most. But it also drew complaints from residents right and left about the fact that we used to divide the fee throughout the city, and regardless if you put anything out or not, you were charged. And that wasn't very popular. So now we do a drop-off every spring. Shorewood also does 2 shred events. I should have mentioned, we, for the last 6 years, have done 2 shred events, one in the spring and one in the fall, which this Saturday is our next one. And ours are free to the public, and you can bring as much as you want. We did have 1 year where the truck filled and we had to close early, and so our spring one, we now have 2 trucks, and the fall one, we just keep at 1. So that has been extremely popular in our city, and it's helping keep that shredding out. I also do promote at that one that people can bring pre-shredded paper, and I keep it separately and take to the drop. So I can try to keep some of that shredded paper. I think one of the other things that we run into with the contamination factor of the market changes is people want to know where they can take things, and I think it's really hard to say, well, you can't put shredded paper in there, but we don't know where you can take it. And I think that's what's happening with some of that. A few of the things, plastic bags, there's still a few locations, but they've gone down. There's a lot of places you can't take it anymore. And I think it's really hard for people, if you take it away, not to at least give them an alternative. So we're really working hard on that. We do a year-round Tangler collection at Shorewood City Hall. It's generally cords and Christmas lights, but it's year-round. We have buckets, and we educate the public, and our public works takes those to a metal recycler, and it has been cost-effective and really popular.
Any other questions for Julie?
Good.
All right, thank you, Julie. And next, Kayla Fisher, Solid Waste Manager in St. Louis Park. And we do have some slides here. Yeah, okay. So I don't know why it doesn't have a forward, but
That's the one.
that's the one.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here. As Philip mentioned, my name is Kayla Fisher. I've been with the City of St. Louis Park for the last 5 years, overseeing our residential solid waste program. And for those of you that aren't familiar with St. Louis Park, we're a first-ring suburb just west of Minneapolis in Hennepin County. And we serve 12,300 households through our solid waste program. So through our solid waste program, we are one of the cities that I feel we're fortunate to have organized collection for all of our materials. We provide weekly collection to those 12,000 plus households of garbage, organic, so food scraps, and yard waste during the yard waste season. Our recycling collection is provided every other week, and we do have 2 garbage service levels that we provide every other week collection for, and that's an optional service level that people can sign up for. Our program has been around for a while. We have pay-as-you-throw rates, which for those of you that don't know, that means that the rates that people pay for their solid waste services, that include garbage, recycling, organics if they choose to sign up, and yard waste, they vary based on the trash service level that people select. So if folks are generating more garbage and need a larger garbage cart, they're paying more for that service. Residents who participate in recycling and maybe opt into our organics program and just generate less trash can choose a smaller garbage cart and therefore pay less money. And we've seen over the last 10 years that we feel there's a connection between those rates and the type of recycling education we're doing. We're actually seeing the tons that the city has to pay to dispose of has historically gone down over the last 10 years. that's in part to recycling education and organics recycling, which is a newer program, about 5 years old. So our recycling program, sorry that text is a little small, but our recycling program has been around for a lifetime, I'd like to say, because I'm similar in age to our recycling program. But it began about 35 years ago. We're one of the first curbside programs in the state to provide curbside recycling collection for our residents. And we had a little fun this last summer celebrating the 35th year of our recycling program. We have really had a focus on education from the beginning, and I think Julie did a great job during her presentation of really talking about how important education is, just to make sure that people are participating. You heard her say they've got 95% participation or set-out rates, and St. Louis Park, we're right up there to get people to participate and to make sure that we keep contamination levels low. So we use kind of the run-of-the-mill education and outreach methods that a lot of cities do. So that means articles in our city newsletter, information on our website, which we update regularly. We use social media. We send out a updated recycling guide on an annual basis, and that's a requirement that we have through our agreement with Hennepin County for recycling services. And then I'll talk in a minute about some of the other things that we're trying to do to reach residents outside of just sort of those normal communication methods. Our contract also requires cart tagging, and that means that every cart that is set out for collection is inspected every time it's collected. So our haulers use semi-automated rear load trucks, which means that the driver or an assistant is getting out, flipping the lid on that bin, looking inside for contaminants or bagged recyclables and that sort of thing. And if the cart is contaminated, it's left behind with a tag on it. So we're doing that at the curb education, so that residents, if they're putting the wrong thing in, they get that education right at the point of set out. For that reason, our contamination rates have been historically low. When we had dual stream recycling, we had a very, very low contamination rate, you know, like the 1 or 2% that now I feel like we can only dream of having a contamination rate that low. Back in 2013, our city switched from dual stream recycling, where residents were separating fibers and cans and bottles, to single sort. So now every resident has a cart that they're putting recyclables in. We did see a bump in contamination at that point, and we are hovering right around 5% contamination when we do our annual recycling audit. Do you have a question?
Do your drivers look at the trash for missed recycling opportunities or just recycling ideas?
Sure. So for those of the folks on the webinar, if you didn't hear the question, that it's wondering if drivers are also, in addition to tagging for recycling and organics, are they tagging in the trash carts if they see recyclables in the trash carts? So it's sort of like missed opportunity. That's a great idea. We're not doing that. The drivers who are tagging for trash are really looking for overfilled carts, bulk stuff that's set out beside the cart that hasn't, in our city, residents have to pay extra if they're going to set out a bulky item that doesn't fit in their cart for disposal. And then they're looking for, like, hazardous waste, things that we definitely don't want there. So that might be a next step. We just started a 5-year contract with Waste Management. Yesterday we hit our 1-year mark. So Waste Management provides collection services for all of our materials, but in our contract with them for recycling, we do revenue share. And we're actually one of those cities that hasn't been approached to renegotiate the contract, maybe because we're so early on. But I think there are some components of our contract that probably speak to that. So we have revenue share in our contract. We've had we've had revenue share in our contracts for over 10 years. We do allow a net negative. So that means that when markets dip the way they have recently and the revenue doesn't exceed our processing costs, we're paying. And as you can see on the slide, 12 out of the last 20 months have been really tough months on our revenue share. We are paying on it. But I think something that Wayne said, I will reiterate, is that when you look at it over the course of our program, over the last 10 years, the city has received over $680,000 in revenue share. So we have been able to, the way our rates are based and because we have that long history of receiving revenue, kind of absorb some of that downturn that we're seeing more recently and continue to weather the storm and hope that we make our way out of it. Another question?
So in the switch from dual collection fiber containers to single, your volumes went up, your contamination went up. Any contamination fee? Has there been any talk? You don't have. I think it's the city of Marshall. Maybe there's some cities that are getting a contamination fee. Heard about that in Dakota County.
Not. No contamination fee. I mean, I think even though our contamination rates went up to 5%, that's still a really good rate for a single stream collection. So there has not been any talk of that. I think our hauler knows what we're asking their drivers to do, at the curb to make sure that we're keeping contamination out. They see what we're doing as far as education to the residents to make sure they're putting the right thing in. So I think because of that relationship, we haven't gotten to that point yet where loads are being rejected. I think for the most part, loads they're seeing coming in from commercial accounts are more problematic than any load coming in from a municipal. So how are we responding to the markets? I talked about this a little bit. I feel like there's kind of three main things that we're doing, and a lot of it is things that all cities are doing. Julie mentioned some of this too. So first is just budgeting. Like I said, we recognize that there's this downturn in markets. It's going to last a lot longer than anything we saw with Green Fence or earlier on in revenue share. So that just means that as we're budgeting for this next year, we're expecting to continue to have to pay over and above the processing costs. That means that we're adjusting our solid waste rates a little bit. We're considering increasing them a little bit more than we had originally expected for 2020 to just make sure that we're covering our costs and protecting our fund balance. And then the big thing is continuing education. So doing all the things we were before, but really trying to drive home that message of following the guide. If you don't see it on the guide, don't include it. Really trying to combat wish cycling through messages in our recycling guides. We have a guide that's going out to all residents this month, and it includes not just the guide, but also some tips. So making sure that we're telling people not to bag their recyclables and explaining why. The fact that if they have their recyclables bagged, they're not going to get recycled. They'll get pulled off the line because workers don't have time to be able to rip open bags and see what's inside. Talking about batteries, that batteries can't be included because they can cause fires. And large, bulky plastic items, keep those out because they're problematic for sorting and they don't have great markets. Another thing we're doing, I know there was a question about actually engaging with residents one-on-one, and over the last 2 years, we've created a Recycling Champions program where we train residents with a little bit more in-depth knowledge on our recycling programs and other things that the city is doing, like our organic program, and equipping them with the resources and knowledge to be able to share it at neighborhood events or other community events. And that's been really successful. Typically when we have those trainings, we have anywhere from 30 to 50 people in the room, and we've held those trainings since 2017. Another great way to reach people is free workshops. We've actually had really good luck getting people to come in for an hour, so a really short time period, and to talk to them about different topics. So we've done waste reduction and reuse, we've done organics workshops, and now this winter we're doing a wish cycling workshop where we'll talk to residents about the importance of putting only what we want in the bin and how these wish cycling behaviors can really affect recycling negatively. Do you have a question?
What time of day do you hold those workshops?
So we've typically held those workshops during the work week, and usually around 6 to 6:30, and we really try to keep it to just an hour, and that has worked really well. We did have, I think we've held one workshop on the weekend, like on a Sunday. St. Louis Park does have a significant portion of our population are Orthodox Jewish folks that observe the Sabbath on Saturday, so we try to provide opportunities outside of the Saturday as well. And we actually, like, we don't go over the top providing, like, great food and snacks like you do here. You know, maybe just some water, and people come in, sit down. It's kind of a quick overview, information, a little bit of interaction, like questions. What are things that you're wanting to hear about, or myths you've heard? And then we try to address those as we go through and leave just a little bit of time for maybe an activity, like a sorting activity or a game at the end. And then the last thing that I'll mention is in our contract, I've talked about it before, we do require the hauler to tag carts. And that's something that we've gotten pushback on, to switch to automated side load collection, where they're using the arm to collect the carts. They do have cameras to be able to see contamination, but we really feel like the combination of resident education and manually inspecting and tagging the carts at the curb is really what has allowed us to keep our contamination levels low. So those are kind of the three main things we're doing. I do think that, like Julie had said, it's a great opportunity to really get back to the basics on education and make sure that folks know what they should put in the bin. So, any other questions?
We have a question from the webinar. Beth is wondering if you could share any presentation materials you use for those workshops.
Sure. So what we do is we put together a PowerPoint. They are admittedly a bit more program specific, but if she wants to reach out, I realize I didn't put my contact information here, but maybe if Philip can share it.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to share anything if she wants to reach out directly.
That'd be easy.
And actually, I do believe the wish cycling workshop, there's the potential that that might be on our cable TV channel as well, so they can watch from one.
Cool.
And how many? Yeah. So the question is, okay. Sure. So the questions are kind of who shows up to the Recycling Champions trainings and the workshops, and about how many folks you're wondering. So those trainings will get anywhere from, like I said, about 30 to 50 for the Recycling Champion trainings. Our workshops have been kind of in the same range, about 30 to 50 people. We do have a range, like there have been people that have brought their families, have brought younger kids, maybe elementary age, older elementary age. I would say probably the span is a little bit on the older demographic, but it's definitely not seniors. I think we're seeing anywhere from school-age kids to people in their mid-20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s, all the way up. So I think it is more the group is heavily female rather than male, but there are definitely households that come like husband and wife, or we definitely see men in the room too. So that's kind of what our workshop group looks like.
Champions program, is that based on recycling?
Yeah, the master recycler composters, it is. So we looked at that model. It's a great successful model that other counties have used as well, or are doing as well, and we decided to do kind of a shortened version. We're really focusing on the city's programs and what we're doing, and trying to make sure that we have folks that are aware of our programs and our guidelines who can share it at neighborhood events and out in the community. And they're a great group to draw on too for like volunteering. If we need volunteers to help doing sorting at events, at discard stations, recycling stations, we often get those folks to come in and volunteer their time there as well. The city's also been doing swaps where we've set up swaps, usually about twice a year. We've done clothing and gardening swaps where people can come in and exchange items to try to promote reuse. And our recycling champions have been really helpful in helping us staff those events as well.
So gardening would be tools?
Gardening tools. We do have some people will show up with plants. We hold it a little bit earlier in the season, so it's meant to be more for tools,
Durables.
not just a plant exchange.
Okay.
But yeah, that's been successful. We've held that I think 2 years in a row now.
Do you also work with the urban buildings? Target?
Sure, yeah. So our program, our collection program is only single family through 4-unit buildings. We offer the service to 5 through 8 unit buildings. They can opt into it if they want. And then for buildings, any sort of apartment building over and above that, our my colleague Emily Barker is our lead for apartments, multifamily, and commercial recycling. And we do have an ordinance that really mirrors the state's requirements for recycling, commercial recycling, and for multifamily recycling. And really, there we're putting the onus on the property manager to provide education to the residents upon move-in, and after there's any changes with their hauler and what's accepted, they're required to provide an update. And so we do connect people with resources. Hennepin County has great resources for signs and that sort of thing. So it's really technical assistance to make sure they're complying with our ordinance.
Does that ordinance require them to have recycling of an organic?
It doesn't require organics, but it does require recycling, that there's the opportunity to recycle, that it's at least as convenient as garbage, so the containers are located near each other, not down in the basement floor and garbage up in the trash room.
What about new construction? Is there any requirement that the city has in multifamily units? You know, like if you have a trash chute, you need to have 3 chutes available. Maybe you don't have to have organic today, but have it built in so that it's available down the road.
So we do have requirements for new construction. If my memory is serving me correctly, we aren't requiring the 3 chutes now, but if it's a lot of multifamily buildings that are going up in St. Louis Park, and this is probably the case throughout the metro, are mixed use where it's multifamily on the top and then retail on the bottom. If they have any plans or are making space for food service, like a restaurant or a grocery store on that main level, then we do require that the building as a whole has organic collection so that they can meet that same requirement. But I would say if anyone does have really specific questions about multifamily or commercial requirements, to get in touch with me, and I can put you in touch with Emily Barker, our lead on those programs.
Does manual tagging and semi-automation make hauling/contract charges more expensive?
I think The easy answer to that is probably yes. During our last contracting round, we really only received proposals for the manual, the semi-automated rear load, because those haulers knew that that was really our preference. It wasn't a requirement in our RFP, our request for proposals, but that's the way we run our program now. And it's not just because of our desire to keep contamination low, it's also because 30% or more of our households are serviced through alleys and like really small, tight alleyways. So using an automated side load truck in those areas just really isn't feasible. I don't have any information on exactly how much more expensive it is, but I think that, you know, it's important to consider that we feel our processing costs have been kept lower because of the lower contamination rates, which we do feel is a result of the requirements for how they're collecting materials.
Do you have to train waste management on the manual process, or is that something that waste management is responsible for training their employees into knowing when and what to tag?
Well, we've had waste management hauling our recycling, you know, for a while. But when our new contract started, they were new to organics. And so we did hold a training session with the staff, going over each item that they should be tagging for and showing them examples. And then they are responsible as new staff starts as part of their training, you know, overall, to be training that staff member on how and what to tag for. We do have a solid waste field inspector that's out in the field making sure that they are tagging for what they're supposed to be tagging for as well.
Any final questions for Kayla? All right. Well, thank you, Kayla. Well, I thought we'd end by, and then maybe I'll just sort of read the headers in here, so sort of final questions, and Wayne can take them. So these solid waste updates, so the categories are sort of legislative session, financial assistance, policy and planning, food prevention and reuse, organics, recycling and market development, of course, landfills, reporting, data, product stewardship, contracts and purchasing, training and education. That's it. So those are the sort of categories in which we have specialists at the MPCA. We're listed at the back. So any sort of final questions or comments, or anything you are doing in your cities that you feel like, well, we haven't talked about this? Obviously, there are many other dimensions of collections and education, but or data or management or reporting, but anything else that you feel like you want to go home with more information about, or questions?
Or another city you want to ask a question to specifically? You've heard, you know, they do something this way. You know, we're trying to build in more time into our workshops, although we really don't have much time today, to, you know, use it as an opportunity to discuss, network, ask those questions with those questions.
I just want to add one thing. If when you call into the main number, if one of those things isn't on there, ask the question. We have it's called an IDI, but it's it breaks it down by issue. So if somebody asks a question about oil or whatever, so just call into our main number if the citizens have, or yourself, and they will get you the right person. Sometimes calls come to me that people don't know what to say, but generally we have somebody for any and all questions. So.
Yeah, and certainly in working with businesses, I mean, some city public works recycling waste staff work with business. Emily, Kelly was saying that there's a person in St. Louis Park who's just working with businesses, but you know, sometimes, especially in smaller cities, some of our GreenStep cities, the economic development person, the community development person is out there doing business development, is checking with businesses, and they're going to get questions about energy, waste, water, recycling, market development. So there are all these dimensions. There are ways to, in total, sort of address the waste stream coming out of both businesses and residents. And we have people at the PCA who can help you with all of those elements.
Question, it's kind of a tangent, but I'm seeing here that Madeline has left your waste prevention and reuse group.
Yeah.
We've had lunch a couple of times over about 10 years, but one of the things the last time she wanted to tell me was about the paper that receipts are printed on off of, like in banks and different places.
Oh, yeah.
That some of those have contaminants. Is there any more information on that? I tried to talk to my poor people at the bank about that. Of course, they don't have any control over that.
I think the bank receipts are different than the retail receipts. I think we had a white paper on there. Send me an email and I'll see if I can take that up.
Okay.
Yeah,
it was the thermal print that I think there were some issues.
It was long-term contaminant exposure.
Right.
Yeah,
So
concern for workers, but also if you save receipts and you're fiddling with them.
Yeah.
I think we did do
banks generally do some. They don't do thermal prints on their receipts. It's the retail receipts that have the issue.
Yeah, there was some experimentation. Some of the food cooperatives had switched over to a different process.
A lot of stores have asked if you want a receipt, which is good. So if you don't need a receipt, or get electronic receipt, which is even better, I would advise people to do that. The nice thing about electronic, if you have a folder in your email, never lose a receipt. So, which generally you will lose them the minute that you leave the store. So,
other questions or thoughts?
If no one else has a question, I continue to be perplexed by what's going on with the glass market. It sounds like there's a lot of hunger for those materials from some of the businesses that use them, and yet the market is non-existent, or it feels like it's near garbage status.
Well, the glass is moving. There's demand for glass. However, actually the price of cullet is actually above the price of virgin materials, and I could say the same. That's going on with we've lost some market share for recycled paper too. Blandon, Sappi, Verso. There's been some switch over. People are using FSC certified sustainable, so their forests are sustainably managed, but it's not recycled. So there is a FSC certification that uses recycled. Not to say that they're hiding behind that, but a little bit. Recycled paper is a bit more expensive. It always has been. At the state, though, we require, we use for the most part 100% recycled, and there's instant statute. And if your city is purchasing off the state contract, you can certainly do that. But getting back to the glass market, our market has been bottles, and bottles are, it's a commodity status. So if we could move, for example, that foam glass would be $200 a ton, if there's, but it's a small amount, but our goal is to raise the price of glass above zero. Not a very high goal, but it's anywhere from -15 to zero right now. We could get it to $10 a ton. I think a lot of people would be very happy.
So should I be buying more things in glass and recycling it? Is there not enough glass in?
I don't. We're actually meeting with Strategic Materials next week to get some more information on that. I'm not sure why the amount of glass in your recycling bin has decreased. It seems like market share they've been holding. They've lost some stuff but we don't know. what's going on with that. It's still, compared to aluminum and PET, we recycle more glass than PET, or aluminum is right around 48%, which is why we aren't at 100%, I don't know. But that's, I think maybe as baby boomers, older people die off, the glass doesn't resonate with them. People like, well, we're not going to die tomorrow, right, Phil?
No, probably not.
But, we remember the returnables, and there was value in glass.
Yeah.
And there should be a value in aluminum, but our PET recycling rate is 20%. It's just awful. Yeah. And part of it, we're not a deposit state, so.
Yeah, I well remember the case of 24 Hohenstein beer bottles on their shoulder going back. I got to say, I must get at least once a month a question from a city person who says, recycled content paper, I don't know, doesn't it jam? Isn't it more expensive? And oh my God, first of all, we have a state contract for 100% recycled content paper. Number two, like, how many years has it been since I've had a jam in our multifunctional printer, which of course is a much more effective way to prevent
20 years.
Oh my God. I mean, like, recycled content paper, it does not jam. And this is just, so, in this purchasing area, you'll run into people in your city who just feel like, I don't know if we can afford that recycled content, or it jams. It's like, it ain't so. And there's a state contract.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the start of your talk that you're getting some of the same questions you were getting 24 years ago. Is that one of them?
Yeah.
I
read an article in the New York Times, which we've had a few over the years saying recycling's not worth it. Why should I recycle it? Or you're just throwing the recycling away.
Right.
I mean, at the state fair this year, I read in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the San Francisco Examiner that we're just throwing this stuff away. No, we are not. So here's even if we're getting zero at the material recycling facility level or at the city level, there's still the jobs that go with that in the state of Minnesota that are paying taxes, that are paying real estate taxes.
Oh, yeah.
The economic benefit may not be at the collection end. It's still at the other end where we're utilizing material. So again, don't throw away a job. That's, I say that often, and I will continue to say that often.
Well, I think the number of jobs. Well, I know there are more at the Eco Experience. We had the figure of 53,000 people in the renewable energy and energy efficiency world. That's more than the number of people in the paper world. So timber, but I think there are probably more than 23,000 jobs in the material processing recycling world than in forestry, which we think Minnesota's big forests. Those jobs are not.
Well, we've lost as biomass has gone down. Fibermen, Minnesota Power, we've lost in the virgin. So there's been some pressure on the recycled content to buy virgin paper, even in our own state government. But we are pointing out that hey, it's the law. So
the total economic analysis, the REMI model, which Wayne runs every once in a while.
Which I'm in the process of doing now, and admittedly, we've lost a lot of jobs in paper, probably a couple thousand, maybe.
I was going to say, this is a little bit of a tangent, but what Wayne mentioned, hearing from people at the state fair, is something that we hear, and probably many of you in this room hear when you're talking to your residents, like, should I even recycle? Like, it's being thrown away. And I feel like those kind of sentiments are important to address in our education, like to tell people if your recyclables are being recycled, and especially that here in Minnesota that we're fortunate, we have better market situations than those who are on the coast do. We had put together some information in a recent newsletter that addresses it more at a higher level, but I think in contracts too, like in our contract, we require that the MRF provides us once a quarter a report that shows where all of the recyclables are going. Granted, that material is trade secret information, so it's not something that we can tell residents
That's a good one.
this is going here. But we can say number one, we know that the state isn't getting any requests for landfill material, and every 3 months, we're getting a report that verifies that all material is going to a market where it's being turned into a product.
Yes.
Why exactly can't you tell the residents, like, what specific end user buyer is getting the materials? Like, what's the secret there?
Well, the hauler, the MRFs identify that information as trade secret. I think, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but.
They don't want their competitor knowing where the market they're selling into.
Probably for some materials, it's more sensitive than others, but, around here, a lot of materials going to West Rock or.
Yeah, or if they're shipped out of state, or, sometimes we'll get shipped to a broker in Texas. Well, it's difficult to track where these material is. We just, there was a seminar yesterday on textiles, and I guess the question is on that is, well, we have war and torn, where exactly does the stuff end up? And so, but it's, they, particularly with the fragile markets, they don't want somebody to come in and saying, well, I know you're paying so-and-so X, I'll sell it to you for X less. And it might be $1, and we had that same issue when markets were good. Some companies were chasing pennies in foreign markets, and the ones that chase pennies in foreign markets are the ones that have the hardest transition back to market. So here's the good thing. China, particularly in the paper market, not in Minnesota, although we hope maybe they would buy, or somebody would buy land from UPM and really ramp that mill up again. But they are shipping dried pulp back to China. So when I said our exports have dropped dramatically, that's for non-finished materials. We're still exporting plastic resin to China. We're in the process. But the step is added here. So we're shipping dry pulp. 9 Dragons is 14 million tons. You can't just not supply them. So that's how they're supplying themselves. So.
Well, we've run over. Thanks for hanging in with us here. Again, thanks to Wayne and next month we probably did have So November 6th we'll switch to stormwater and green infrastructure. You can join us. Thanks. And grab something to eat on your way out.
Yeah. Well. She participates. She's got a lot of other.
Oh, I realize that.
But yeah, she has participated in. Yeah, she's supported, obviously. Delta's our main. She was